Good.
And welcome to God's Economy, your intersection between your focus and your finance and your faith. And today we're back after a little bit of a break. I took the month of May to just recuperate and to recover my soul a little bit, and then to come back and to complete our four money skills journey. We've been venturing through the money skills that we should be having this year. We started all the way from actually understanding what financial freedom is. We understood what the three L's of a meaningful life are. And then we've actually ventured into the four money skills that you are supposed to have as you are trying to build your financial freedom, which is your high five goals. And we'll talk about those things at some point later. But the point of the matter of today's conversation, I'm joined by my co-host Stephanie Matonga, and to everyone who's joining me, please, good morning to you and a godly and blessed day to you. Stephanie, if you are there, I don't know if we've still got her there.
I
How are you
am.
doing this morning? How are you doing this morning?
I'm fine. I'm very blessed this morning. I think I've had quite a number of calls, comments, and of course, we've had a very interesting, good word as we started the day. So, yeah, it's been good. I don't know about you, but it's been a very good day so far.
It always is. It's a fruitful day. The point is to always have a fruitful day, to always find a way to multiply. I think there should be a way that a person should fit that into their schedule. To be
Mm.
fruitful, to multiply, to fill the earth. Are you expanding? Are you dominating? Those are. I think that should always be the description of your day. Was it a fruitful day? Did you create something? Was it a creative day? Did you multiply? Did you expand, or did you dominate? That should, if you haven't, if you have not used one of those four as a description of your day, I don't think it was a godly day. That's the way I'll
Yeah.
put it. Anyway, Stephanie, let's get back to where we were last week. The last time before we had left, when we started our journey in the four money skills, we got into managing money. And the four pillars of managing money that I started with managing your emotions, because we talked about emotional spending. Then I recently talked about managing your money in the terms of actual budgeting. Okay, because the first money skill was actually making money. The second money skill is managing money. We're going to eventually go into multiplying and maintaining money. But the one we're dealing with today is managing your debt. And the reason is this, Stephanie: your number one wealth building tool in this world is your income. And the more your income is diverted into dealing with payments to other people, unfortunately, your wealth building capabilities start to become diminished. So, one of the stories I want to talk about today about how to handle debt and how dangerous debt is the story of Second Kings 4, which is Second Kings, the book of Second Kings, chapter 4, verse 1 to 7, which is the story of Elisha and the widow. And everyone remembers the story a lot, the widow with the olive oil. But I want to use it as an explanation of how to actually deal with insurmountable debt and how debt comes along. How it usually trickles along, how dangerous it can be, and then how to actually find yourself out of it. So I want to really do these three things, okay? These three things to try and help you, especially in managing it. So there are three components, there are three questions we're going to answer here. How does debt come about? How dangerous can it be? And what do we do to deal with it? Okay. And this story, in these wonderful 10 verses or less, this is where we actually get a lot of answers from this. Sorry, in 7 verses, we actually get a deep answer on on all the dynamics of debt. And I'm sure, Stephanie, and I'll ask you this: have you ever actually gone through that verse and understood it from a debt management perspective? Okay, I think we've we've lost her for a second, but let's get into it. From let's get into today's reading, and I'll be reading from the book of Second Kings 4, chapter 4, verse 1 to 7. And I'm reading from the NIV version, and it reads, "The wife of a man from the company of prophets cried out to Elisha,
Mm.
your servant, your pardon."
No, no, I wasn't saying anything. I was agreeing with what you're saying.
Thank you. The wife of a man from the company of prophets cried out to Elisha, "Your servant, my husband, is dead. You know that he revered the Lord. But now his creditor is coming to take my two boys as his slaves." Elisha replied to her, "How can I help you? Tell me, what do I have? What do you have in your house?" "Your servant has nothing there at all," she said, "except a jar of oil." Elisha said, "Go around and ask your neighbors for empty jars. Do not ask for just a few. Then go inside, shut the door behind you and your sons, pour the olive oil into jars as each is filled, and put it on one side." She left him, shut the door behind her and her sons. They brought the jars to her. They brought the jars to her and kept pouring. And when all the jars were full, she said to her son, "Bring another one." But he replied, "There's nothing. There's not a jar left." Then the oil stopped flowing. She went and told the man of God, and he said, "Go sell the oil, pay your debts, and you and your sons can live off what is left." Now, as simple as that story is to everyone, and I'd love everybody who's watching today, please give me what your takeaways are from today's looking at this, because this is, like I said, when you're looking at managing your debt, I want to look at three things: the source of the debt, the danger of the debt, and the solution of the debt. Okay, so I really want to look at how the source of the debt also now comes to the symptoms and the risks that you're going to face, and also the solution, how to deal with it. So, the first thing I want to look at is the source of the debt. Now, the widow cried out to Elisha and said, "Look, the man of the house has passed away." Now, remember, historically back then, the men of the house were the ones who actually brought income into the house. So what happens here that actually causes the instant debt is that the household has no income. Okay, so when your income stream is either compromised or diminished, or it has been hurt in any way, shape, or form, it is very easy to accumulate debt. Remember, just by living as a human being, you have costs to bear. Okay, remember that every day you have to eat, you have to sleep somewhere, you're gonna have to put on something. Okay, unless maybe you're gonna be homeless at that point. But just remember, you're gonna have to be in a shelter. You're gonna have to wear some sort of food. If you get sick, you're gonna need treatment. So what usually puts a lot of people in debt is when their income gets either their income gets trapped at one point and their costs of living expand too quickly, or their income drops below their cost of living, and then they start to accumulate debt. Now, some people will accumulate debt due to an instance, like maybe they had a hospital bill that cost too much, and it really has put them in a horrible situation. Maybe they had a car accident and they've had to really deal with that. Those are short-term causes of debt. But usually the majority of people who find themselves in debt find themselves in systemic debt, where their lifestyles or their livelihoods, so it's either lifestyle or livelihood, is higher than that of their income. Now, the widow had no income, but she still had to eat, she still had to sleep, she still had to be in a house. So unfortunately, that man had creditors as well. So and she was still a responsibility of them. So the reality is, the first thing you need to always do to try and limit your capabilities of having debt are two things. One, make sure you are living well within your income. Okay, as difficult as that is to people, that is a reality. And you do that by either growing your income aggressively and containing your costs, or containing your costs aggressively as your income grows slowly. Okay, that is the first step with debt management. The first step, even before you try and fix your debt, like before you start paying everything off, actually you have to go back to your income statement and look, what is happening with my money? How much am I spending? How much do I make? That is the first question you need to start looking at. So without a budget, getting out of debt is nearly impossible. Okay, so you need to make sure now, do you have an income stream? What has been your income stream? The you need to start looking at the information system. Without information, you get lost. In fact, the Bible says, without for a lack of knowledge, my people perish. You only acquire knowledge when you accumulate information and add meaning to that information. So information with meaning is knowledge. So if you have no historic financial statements of your life, if you're not doing your your budget, are you not doing a daily budget? I advise people just in general, if it's too hectic to budget on a daily basis, where I do say you should budget for 15 minutes, on your phone, just make a note and have days Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Okay. And every time you spend or earn money, just log it in. I earned this much from this. I spent this much for this. And then at the end of the week, go in, pick a day and reconcile your budget. That is a very simple activity to do, because once you start tracking your spending, you start to see where the leakages are coming from. So usually there's a higher expense. Okay. Now, unfortunately, like I said, this woman had a husband who had passed away. Widows are always in danger. In fact, in society, we should be taking care of orphans and widows. Those are the two who really, really need support, and especially because in these circumstances, widows really were helpless. Okay, they were prohibited from work a lot. They were prohibited from economic activity. So it really made it very difficult for them to go out and make a living and support themselves when their husbands had passed away. So, but then again, this is also an argument for where the polygamy system comes from. But we're not here to promote that. The reality I'm trying to point out here is that income becoming bigger than expenses, expenses getting bigger than income is usually the issue. The second thing you can do to try and prevent debt is also to have an emergency fund. Okay. Now, obviously, she had no cash lying around. So that's another thing that she was exposed to. So income expenses that were higher than income and no cash lying around left her in a situation where she could not service debt. So you need to have a 3 to 6 months emergency fund to help you do that. So this is an example of what happens in this situation. So the first thing we're looking at is the source of the debt. The source of the debt often comes from income below expenses and no emergency fund. This creates a debt situation. Okay. So if you sort out these two, your probabilities of going into debt is almost next to nothing. It really is. It's next to nothing. If you have discipline enough, if you're disciplined enough to live within your income and to have an emergency fund, you are unlikely to spend in a very silly and frivolous way. Okay. Now she was in a circumstance. Now that's a different situation. Now let's go to the second part of this. In the book, she also now says. And she also now says, but now his creditor is coming to take my 2 boys as his slaves. So now what happens when it comes to debt is that it is something that will rob you of your freedom. It will rob you of your freedom. So this is what you have to be very careful of. Debt, in as much as it promises you to give you things that are out of your reach now, it will take the freedom you have right now, because now you are slave to the person who owes you money. Now you are answerable to that person. Now that person has control over your life. And that is the problem. Whenever you owe someone anything, they can call you whenever they want. They can demand whenever they want. There is that squeeze they can put on you. And that's the reality. And at that time, in this time back in the days, in fact, the basis of slavery was to pay debt. In fact, even if you go to the Lusaka Museum, pardon?
And my hope was, as we were celebrating Africa Freedom Day, my hope was that people would get free from debt, because really debt is actually a thorn in people's flesh. Because, like you said, the one you owe can call you at any time. They can tell you anything, and you have little or no choice. Now, we had somebody who, kept running from one debt to the other, practically because they were using they would credit money from one person to pay the other, and credit again to pay. So it's a cycle that never ends, and it's quite disturbing.
Well, and that's because they're not solving the root cause. The root cause of the debt is income is less than expenses. That's the root cause. Or they've got a huge liability that their income and they haven't created enough margin. Okay. I- The first step of paying off debt is to stop accumulating it. That's the first step. The step one is to stop accumulating it because you cannot fix a wound if you're still bleeding. You have to stop the bleeding so that you can actually attend to the wound because debt is a financial wound. Now I know everybody will talk about this good debt and that stuff. All I can tell you is this: those people who are online and everything who always tell you about how you build wealth with debt, how the very rich use debt, and all that, that is a very small percentage of people. Very small. 99.99% of people cannot manage debt for wealth building. They can't do it.
Mm,
It's a very difficult thing. They lack the discipline. A lot of people know your weaknesses. Do not be arrogant to your weaknesses because a lot of people are chasing wealth too quickly. And that's the other form of debt people also have. And in fact, I missed that one out is that people are in a rush. People who are in a rush decide to borrow so that they can try and get a life that is ahead of where they are. Either they're trying to build assets, but they're pumping up a lot of debt to do it, and then at the end of the day, the math doesn't work. So they end up having, and I've seen this before, where somebody will take out a debt, they'll build a home, okay, and that's a good asset to have. They'll try and put it on rent, fantastic, but then they'll find out that they're making 5,000 kwacha in rent, but paying 10,000 kwacha in interest payments. That thing is going to sink them. That's where the problem is coming. That thing is going to sink them, okay, and it's really a strain on a lot of people. So people don't do the math. How much am I going to be earning from this asset versus how much do I have to pay in taxes, in insurance, in maintenance, and in loan repayments? How much do I have to pay on these things in order for it to make sense? People don't do that math, and then once again, a debt accumulates. So the symptom of debt is that it often takes something away from you or it takes away your freedom. And it often takes from you both physically and emotionally. She was in distress. Her sons were going to be taken away as slaves because back then, as I said, even if you go to the Lusaka Museum, you'll actually find that most of slavery was debt repayment. Okay, we called it indentured servitude. When somebody was in debt, you could actually take them as a slave or take their sons as a slave. That was not just a Jewish principle. It was even here in Zambia, in this area, pre-colonial areas. This was actually the rule. This is how we used to trade slaves as people. So it does enslave you emotionally and it does take from you physically. And that is what debt will do. When it now accumulates to a certain point, it can now start to take from you. It seems good at the beginning because you're enjoying whatever it is that you want without paying for it. But when it comes with interest and it starts to demand from you way more than you could. And if you lack the discipline to prepare for it, which most people do, unfortunately, it will be a very stressful situation. And unfortunately, it will take the things that truly matter to you. The things you took for granted. Debt has destroyed marriages. Debt has destroyed friendships. Debt has destroyed families. Debt has ruined businesses and careers. Debt ruins things that you took for granted. Okay? So when it comes to debt, you really, really have to think multiple times about whether this is worth it. Because what you are going to say yes to by accumulating that debt is going to cost you things that you never thought you could lose. You can lose your health from debt. Okay, the stress and the pressure of picking up phone calls regularly with your heart palpitating and not getting any sleep regularly, that can weigh on you. Okay, people have blood pressure issues. People can go into seizures from things like this. These are the realities. And when you boil down to it, and the worst part of it all, Stephanie, people even commit
mm,
suicide from going into debt. Okay.
yes.
The stress that people are going through. You'll hear somebody killed themselves and they'll say, what happened? He owed this and this and this person, but why couldn't this be solved? Because in that situation, he was being driven to the ends of the earth in his mind about that. And he had no option than to take his life. Okay. So you really have to look at debt very carefully. It looks good when you're borrowing it, but you have to ask yourself a simple question: what would happen if the job I have was gone and I have this debt on my hands now? What would happen if the business deal I'm borrowing this for doesn't go through and I have this debt on my hands? What would happen if the business sinks that I'm going to put this debt into? Now I've got this debt on my hands. You must ask the worst case situation. And you must look at it and say, can I manage that worst case situation? People like to say, no, you have to be optimistic. Yes, you should be optimistic in life, but don't be blind to the downsides. Do not blind yourself to the possibilities that things can go wrong. People who are positive in life are not people who are blind to the downsides. They're people who can look in the face of the downside and say, I can actually manage that. Okay. If this business goes under, I'm okay. I've got a backup. I can manage it, or I can just pay it off 6 months. I've figured it out. So always plan for the worst and pray for the best. That's the way you live your life. Plan for the worst, pray for the best, and move forward. Because this is where a lot of it goes wrong. People want to pretend the worst case can never happen. And then when it does, that's when the shock hits them. That's when the stress hits them. And that's when we start to ask, but what happened to this person? They stressed, they're in hospital with high blood pressure, or unfortunately, they took their own life from stress. And this is the seriousness of it. Like, it gets to that point. And I think this is what you must ask yourself. The things you are taking for granted, your health, your family, your place in society, your job, your everything, the things you think are always going to be there, that debt can take those things away if you haven't planned for it correctly. So ask yourself a question. Is borrowing for that car, borrowing for that house, is it a wise move? Is it worth the things you already have? Because you know what the other problem, unfortunately, with debt, Stephanie, is a lot of people want things
Mm.
just because they don't have them. Oh, my friend has that TV and I don't have it. I have to have it. Okay, let me just go ahead and borrow to get it. And then you're stuck. You can't pay this. Maybe that salary increment you're expecting doesn't come through. And these are the stories you constantly are dealing with. I know there's a lot of people, unfortunately, who start their life with student loan debt. Okay. And we keep telling
Mm.
them, I understand you had to go to university. We understand that. But did you had a choice of which degree? Did you get the right degree? Did you think about it? People even go to university and they'll say, we didn't know that was a loan. They just signed and they got free money. So let me first tell you something first. I think everyone should
Mm.
recognize there's no free money in this world. There's no free money. Every quarter you are given, somewhere in your life, you are paying for something. Everything you
Mm.
think you are given for free, somewhere down the line, you're paying for it. There is a debt somewhere, and it may not be a tangible financial debt. It could even be an emotional debt. Somebody has just given you something. Now you owe them emotionally. Now they control you. Now they get to speak to you however they want. So anything you get for free from people, I'm telling you, there's something down the line you're gonna pay for it. Whether it's a set in stone debt or not, you are going to pay for it. Okay.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
think that's what everybody should have in their mind. Anything, whether you're being sent to school for free, that's not your family, my friend. They're going to come and get something from you. They are going to get something from you. Okay, that is how society works, and prepare your mind for that. You may call it being cynical, but that's realistic. That's how the realities of life work. Somebody will always try and get something from you, including the government. So I think the first thing, this thing of blinding yourself and saying, no, but now we've got student loans, we didn't know, it's because you thought there was something called free money. Okay, and there's no such thing. Most free money is trapped in debt or slavery. Those are the two things that often free money leads to. So this is not this woman's fault. Now, I want everybody to recognize something. If you want to progress in life, separate fault from responsibility. Just because it's not your fault, that doesn't mean it's not your responsibility to do something else. You can tell me all the things that happened to you, and that is tragic. It's painful. I sympathize with you. But the reality is, you still have the power to respond the right way. You still have the ability to respond the right way. And this is one thing that Elisha actually teaches the widow. Okay, you still have the abilities to hold the response. It was not her fault that her husband passed away. It was not her fault that she was in a society that basically prohibited women from working a lot or limited women's working capabilities. That was not her fault. But there is a way that she could have taken responsibility, and Elisha is going to help her do this. And that is what you can start to do. So, one of the things you have to also do is separate fault from responsibility. some the ability to start taking to start saying it's this one's fault, it's that one's fault, it's this one's fault. Whoever's fault it is, fine. But you always have the responsibility of your life. You always do. Whether you're in business and a business partner stole from you and has wrecked your business, you have the responsibility. In other words, the capabilities to respond to that situation positively and manage it progressively. Okay? You always
Mhm.
have the capabilities to respond and to pick the response you want. Um, Pastor Gregory DeCow actually said, the things that happen to us are by chance, but the way we respond to them is by choice. Okay. So we choose the way we're going to respond and we're going to process things. Rick Warren actually said, pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. So things can happen to you, but you choose whether you're going to learn a lesson from that, get stronger through that, or suffer. Okay. So it's your choice how you're going to process the pain. And whether you're going to process it as a lesson, whether you're going to process it as strengthening, whether you're going to process it as suffering. That is your choice as a person. But the pain happening to you, you had no control over that. So she had no control over the loss of her husband. She had no control over the laws of the land. She had no control over this. Okay, that the fact that somebody can come and take your sons when your husband died and now you've got all this debt that's racking up, she had no control. So,
You know,
yep.
now I'm actually thinking that maybe lack of financial literacy is one of the reasons why people find themselves in huge debt. A few weeks ago, I think we're talking about the fact that what if banks could actually offer financial literacy to somebody before they get a loan? Do you think we could have had a different situation? Now, I'm thinking that many people today have no financial knowledge. Number one, on how to use the money, when to use, and where to use. Look at how many people have so far collected the NAPSA withdrawal funds. But of course, where are they? Are we seeing any development? Some have even been lost for 2 weeks when they actually just collect. So maybe it's because we people don't really have valid financial knowledge.
You can have financial knowledge, but you also, some people are also just not disciplined. I think people also don't want to get it to the point. You think that just because people know, people have, there's character issues among society. And I think you also have to understand that character is more important even. There are people with no financial literacy who can make very sound decisions because decisions come from character a lot more. Now, should banks issue out financial literacy before people loan? That's why credit history is actually an exhibition of your behavior with money. So they look at your behavior with credit and how you pay it back over time. So your credit history actually speaks to your credit character. It speaks to the character of yourself. So they look at your habits. Do you make payments on time? Have you got issues outstanding? That is what your credit history should show. I think as a country, we should also show people their credit record. I think people should have access to their credit history, or at least their credit score at the Central Credit Bureau. And you should be able to now actively start to strategize and work around your credit score, how to improve yourself, because at least that points out where you are falling short. But I think we underplay the importance of character. I think people should be literate about money, but whether you're literate or not, if you're not of sound character, you're always going to misuse money. And no matter whether you've got a degree, whether you don't have a degree, whether you've got grade 12, whether you don't, 70 odd percent of people with degrees are financially literate, but they still find themselves in horrible financial situations because there's a character problem. Okay, there's a character problem. We've all found ourselves in issues with money because they're character issues we didn't work out. So I think, in as much as yes, it is true, people need to become more literate about money and understand the implications of debt. I think that is important. They must understand the implications of debt. Their motives behind acquiring the debt is not based on knowledge of implications or not. It's based on their character. Okay, are they patient? This is a question I've even asked many people before. People before will tell me, and I've said this before, even about education. I've said before to many people that if you cannot afford an outright degree from the beginning, perhaps consider are your other options. There are various other options that you should be looking at in terms of what kind of education you should be acquiring. And I've said to people before that one of the highest return on investments in terms of education is actually a diploma. Because a diploma as a starting point, diplomas and certificate as a starting point have a 63%. They've got a 63% employment rate as of the 2020 labor force survey. They've actually shown that. And simultaneously, you've actually even seen that while degrees have a 77% employment rate. So I've said you actually have an option to get a much cheaper education first, get into the labor force, and then work your way up to a degree. But there's an anger and an impatience. Like whenever you talk to people like that, they say, "Why? Why can't?" There's an anger that they respond with, almost an anger when you say something like that. And it simply boils down to the fact that that's impatience. No, but the other generations got it. What about us? That
Mm.
entitlement also kicks in as well. So it's character issues that even lead to this. So even when you try and have a conversation with people telling them you have to find a cheaper option first, they won't even speak to you about it. When we're talking about business loans, how come somebody else got this 100,000 loan? No, even I deserve it. There's an anger that people have. So there's a character you need to solve before you try and address this issue. So let's take a look, Stephanie, at somebody now who's in debt. And let's take a look at what Elisha prescribes. And I'm going to give you a couple of things that you can do to people. And people take these notes down. These can actually help.
Mm.
So Elisha says this. He says, "Go around, ask your neighbors for empty jars. Do not just ask for a few. Then go inside, shut the door shut the door behind you and your sons. Pour oil into jars and fill each of them up and put it to one side." Okay. She left. So this is the instructions he gives. Here we go. Am I back to being audible?
Yes, you are. I was actually going to ask you that question.
Yeah, unfortunately, we just had a little bit of a.
Okay. Well, while we're waiting on the other side, do send us a text message on 077 Well, you could also get to calls directly. If you have a question, the number to call is 077 Do you know that we're live on Facebook, Money
I
FM
don't know if
Zambia
I'm heard.
93.7,
Can you hear me?
and you can get to comment. Definitely, Mnyumba, you're back on the Audible track. Okay, so Munyumba seems to be out. Okay, 077
Sorry about
is
this,
the number
Stephanie. Can you hear
that
me now?
you are calling on. Yes, do go ahead.
Hello.
We can actually hear you.
Okay. I am back now. So thank you very much to everybody. Now, so let's go through the prescriptions on how to handle debt. So let's go through what Elisha actually told us. So there are seven things actually Elisha tells the widow. Now I'm going to start this by saying one of the biggest problems as Christians is we don't try and look at the Bible on how to circumvent and manage debt. So when Elisha was dealing with this debt of the widow, he didn't go and deal with the creditor. He had the power to do so, by the way. Elisha actually had the power to go and condemn the creditor and explain that to her. I don't know if we've got Stephanie back now. He actually had the power to actually go and condemn that creditor because the Bible did condemn profiting off of orphans and widows. So he could have easily cursed the creditor and forced him to forgive the debt of the widow. That actually could have been in his power. And it was, that is the law. The law actually does say look after orphans and widows. It actually even says forgive their debt, help them out. The Bible actually does prescribe this. So there is a law inside the law of Moses that did speak about helping orphans and widows. But Elisha opted to try and teach a different lesson here. But Elisha knew that if he handled the debt for the widow, it would simply accumulate again. So because she had no means of living, and her living would cause her situation to occur again. Okay, so Elisha looked at the root cause of it. She had no means. Okay. So even if you went and said, forgive her debt, it would still come back again and reorganize and reaccumulate as a debt. Even Zambia as a country, we've had our debt forgiven. But because we didn't fix the issue of imbalanced budgets, poor industrial development, as a result, we went and reaccumulated even more debt. So this is what happens even to people if you don't sort out the root cause behind it. So Elisha was actually going for the root cause. The widow and her living were actually the root cause of the debt. So Elisha empowered the widow to get out of debt using the following steps. The first thing he did was he identified her current means of productivity and income. Okay. So he asked the question, what do you have in your house? Okay. That was the first question. So whenever you're trying to get out of debt or you're trying to deal with debt, the first thing you have to ask, number one, what do you have? Okay. What do you have in terms of things you can sell off? If it's a once off debt, but if it's a debt based on your livelihood, what do you have to generate or grow your income? What opportunities are in front of you? What people do you know? What extra works can you do? What can you do when trying to deal with a debt? Okay, so that's question number one you must ask yourself. Now she had jars of olive oil, so she had a productive resource. She said, I didn't have much, but there was a productive resource. Now remember something. No matter how small what you have is, you may not understand that you have the capacity as a human being to bear fruit, to multiply and expand something and dominate with it. So, no matter how small something is, if you apply your capabilities, you can multiply that thing. Okay. If you have a small camera, are you using it for events on weekends in order to make that extra revenue? If you have the ability to cook, are you making extra meals for people or lunchtime meals? Are you selling them? Are you making fritters and then selling them at work? What are you doing in order to generate an extra stream of income or multiply your stream of income or to your actual main stream of income? What are you doing? At work, are they commission opportunities? Are they opportunities for you to make higher sales? What are you doing to increase your capacity to generate an income? That is one. Even in your business, what are you doing with the current business you have? Not you want to go and borrow so that you can increase your production. What can you do right now with the business that you have right now to multiply it? Can you find different customer streams? What can you do? So the first thing you have to look at is what do you have, and then strategize around how you can multiply this thing. Okay, now let's go through the ability to intensely generate your income. So the next thing we're going to look at that Elisha says to us, so he identified a productive resource, the olive oil that was there. Okay, so however the small thing is, that is enough. That is the thing that you have to focus on. Then he said they focused on increasing their production capacity of the current resource by engaging the sons to join and work, and also getting empty jars from friends. So, how do we increase our capabilities to expand our income generation? Collaborations. Okay. Who can you work with to try and expand your means of income generation? She worked with her sons. She then got jobs from her neighbors. Which network of people can you work with? Not to get into more debt, but to support your efforts to try and get yourself out of this situation. Who can do this with you? Do you have people who can assist you? Do you have the people who are in the problem with you? Can we all band together and work together? You cannot get out of this alone on your own. You can get out of this. And that doesn't mean I'm saying go and start asking everyone to give you. You get out of this by working with people, by trading with people, by collaborating with people. People are able to give you opportunities in order for you to express a new talent, to be able to make that extra income or to grow your income, so that you can now fix that root cause. Because the issue here is making sure that she could generate an income. She had a means problem when it came to her debt. Her debt was a result of her means and her capability to generate an income. So when you're looking at your income, who can you work with? Because this is how God has created this world, that we work with each other to improve our capabilities. So one, okay, and I'm going to write this one down in the comments section. What is your productive resource? What is your income generating or productive resource? Okay, what is your income generating productive resource? And you have to identify this and focus on one main thing. Okay, so what can you do to make money? That's the first question that you need to ask yourself. What
And
can you do to make money? Number two is who can you work with to multiply your making of money? Okay, so that's what you need to start looking at, because collaboration amplifies results. Okay.
Munyumba,
So as I said, number one, what can you do to make money? Number two, collaboration. Who can you work with to make money or to increase your capacity to make money? So you have to also look at who you are collaborating with. Okay. So collaboration is an important function, because you may only have 24 hours. Her sons had to work with her because they only had 24 hours. They only had a minimum time. She had to get extra jars. So who can you work with? Okay. Who can you work with in order to multiply your money? Okay. In order to multiply your money. And yes, I'm writing this live for people because I actually realized you might be able to take these notes. So that's the second question you need to answer whenever dealing with debt. The third question you need to answer, which Elisha managed to answer, the third thing he did is he says, go into a state of intense focus. Now, it's a very subtle statement, but he actually said go into a state. Now, most of the time, now going to a state of intense focus is actually captured in the sentence, shut the door behind you. Okay, shut out everything else, all those frills, all those things, all those fun weekends, all that stuff. Shut it out. Okay, you have to shut it out, and you have to focus intensely on ramping up your income, maintaining your costs, and targeting this debt harshly. Okay, so you have to go into a intense state of focus. So go into an intense state of focus. Now, Dave Ramsey calls this gazelle-like intensity. Okay, so where you are just absolutely dead focused, keep a track of who you have to pay, all sorts of things. Now, you can have them on a debt snowball. I'll talk about these things a little bit more later, but go into an intense state of focus. Number four, number four is sorry, as I said, go into an intense state of focus. The next thing Elisha did is they multiplied the output of olive oil by spending time and energy pouring more and more into the jars. Okay, so you have to, the next stage you have to do is you have to then put yourself into a hard state of work here, and you have to now focus on producing more and more and more. So during these times when you're in debt, you have to work extra hours. You really have to work extra hard because you have to take yourself out. So increase your productivity. So you have to increase your productivity. They had to pour more and more and more oil. Now you'll notice that the more you put yourself out there, the more opportunities there are, the more productive you can be. So you just have to take your time and ask yourself, these 24 hours am I using? How much of it am I using to spend money? How much of it am I using to make money? Okay, so by going into the room and pouring the jars, and he said, don't just get a few jars, get a lot. So increase your capacity and go for it. Okay, that is the main thing you're trying to do. Increase your capacity and just go for it. But do not go into debt for increasing your capacity. That is not a symbol to do that. Okay, so increase your capacity and productivity. That is how you increase the income. Then the next thing he said is he said, now sell. So after they have completed the work, she goes back to Elisha. They've poured so much oil until they've run out. But she went and told the man of God and said, and he said, go and sell the oil, pay your debts, and you and your sons can live off what's left. Okay, so these are the next things he says. Use the proceeds. Okay, so it's the first thing it says is trade your productivity. So you've increased your productivity. Now you're able to take pictures. You're able to do this. What are you able to do for all this extra money? Now use it, trade it, sell it on the market, sell the oil on the market, sell this extra that you have, and you're now able to generate this income. You're able to generate this income by trading with other people. So engage in commerce at this point. You get out of debt by engaging in higher commerce, selling more, and then allocating the extra towards repaying your debt by keeping your life simple. So sell the increased output for money. Then settle the debt with the increased money that you've gotten. Don't use this increase of money to increase your lifestyle. Use it to settle your debt. Get rid of this hanging liability that is threatening your livelihood, your peace, and everything. And then he goes on to say, and you and your sons can live off the rest. And this is an important part. They created a livable cash flow from the newly increased output to get out of debt and stay out of debt. So use the increased output and productivity to build wealth and stay out of debt and never go back. Okay. So these are the things that you need to try and do. So there are 6 steps you need to follow. 7 steps. 1, identify your economically valuable, available resource. Not things you wish you had, things you have. Get help from friends, partners to increase your production of that item. Go into an intense state of focus. Shut out the things that don't matter and focus intensely on knocking out this debt by increasing your income and actually being able to pay it off. 4, you need to increase your capacity and productivity. Okay, buy some time for increased production if you have to, but make sure you are increasing your productivity and creativity. Pour yourself into this. Okay, multiply by using your increased produce to produce more of that identified item. Sell that thing, whether it's your time, your skill, whatever it is. Sell it for money. Then use that money to settle your debt. Okay, and then use the increased capacity. Now that you've now found a way to make more money, stay like that. And now use that increased capacity that you've used to get yourself out of debt to now go and now build wealth so that you stay out of debt permanently. Okay. And that is something that you want to try and look at going forward. This is a prescription of how to deal with debt and its symptoms. So remember, debt comes from usually your income is lower than your expenses. So your income is lower than your expenses. It'll cost you your freedom. It'll cost you your peace. It'll cost you the things that really matter that you thought you would never lose. And you use those steps to get out of that situation. The average person, if they focus intensely, can get out of debt between 1 to 5 years. If they give everything to it, they shut down everything, they stop doing luxury spending, they cut back wherever they can. But you can't get out of debt without a written budget. You must have a written budget so that you can see where the things are, cut out the fluff, what is not working, and then just make sure you stick to a simple life. We call it a beans life, where you're just eating beans and nishima. And it's just a beans life, and you are pushing yourself to make sure that you get out of debt. Sacrifice. People will mock you, yes, but trust me, they will mock you worse when debt comes and rips through your life. Okay, and they may not even mock you; they'll mourn you at worst if that debt even forces you to unfortunately take your life from the stress that it's giving you. So with that, I don't know if we have Stephanie back or if she's here with us, or if not. But with that,
Definitely.
I wish you all a blessed Sunday. We will be talking about generosity in the next week. We'll talk about radical generosity, so that once you've built wealth, you can now start looking at being generous, because the purpose of having that blessing is to be a blessing in society. So we want to talk about that. Yes, we've talked about the curse of debt. Now we're going to talk about the blessing of being generous with money. When is, how to, what to do with it, and how to live going forward. So with that, I wish you all a blessed Sunday. God bless. Have a wonderful day. The Money Gospel Avenue